Good morning, adventurers. My name is Ben, and welcome to a morning show where I sit around, drink some tea, and talk about D&D. Today, we actually have no news. That's right, no news. I was wrong about them potentially keeping the class survey open for a month because they have closed it at this point. So hopefully you got in and got to fill it out while it was still open. Because again, I think they're probably going to use that information to give us a revised player's handbook, hopefully sometime in 2022. Moving along from news, because that's really it. Other than the fact that Gen Con is coming up soon, I guess that doesn't super count as D&D news. Other than there are going to be lots of big names in the community there, so stay tuned for that. I guess streams that are coming up today, Tuesday. Um, there's actually a big one today that I am super excited to get to talk to you guys about. I want to make sure that I don't miss any of the information, so we're going to go over to the whiteboard so that I have all of it right here. There is a one shot on twitch.tv/superdillin. That is SUPERDILLIN at 7 p.m. Eastern Time today, featuring Abria Iyengar, Gabe Hicks, and Ginny D. This one shot is going to be benefiting the Trans Lifeline. There are going to be giveaways from Roll20 and Die Hard Dice. Um, so make sure you guys tune in and watch. If you can't watch it live, make sure you catch the VOD because um, the work that they are going to be doing, the people they're going to be helping out, are in huge need of help right now. So please, please, please do your best to tune in, support in any way that you can. I'm really excited about it. I happened upon it sometime last week on Super Dylan's TikTok page, and I wrote it down immediately because I was super excited to make sure that I talked about it on this and that I got to actually watch it. So again, that is twitch.tv/superdillin. That's SUPERDILLIN at 7 p.m. Eastern Time today. Um, Moving along then from our news and streams, today I want to talk about your two core ability scores as the second day in Character Week. I say two. A lot of characters have more than two ability scores that are sort of their core. That's just sort of, the nature of D&D characters sometimes. So obviously you've got your main score. That's your big score. That is your top highest score. Every class is kind of obvious. Some of them have two of those main ability scores that sort of overlap, but um, there's the one that you almost always lean into if you're building a character either long term or if you're building it with this sort of specific build in mind. So for like barbarian, it is probably strength. It could be constitution, but it's probably strength. Fighter, it's either strength or dexterity. Wizard, it's going to be intelligence. Cleric, it's going to be wisdom, etc., etc., etc. So you have that chief top ability score. You have a secondary top ability score. Usually, uh, a lot of times, it's actually Constitution, just because of the way that things end up working out. It could be something else, like if you're a fighter that's strength based, you might want to have a high dexterity instead. If you don't plan on wearing heavy armor or something like that, monks, it'll probably be wisdom. Rangers, it'll probably be wisdom. That sort of thing. A lot of these classes with a secondary spellcasting feature as well will have that. So fighter could also be intelligence. Paladin, honestly, kind of a toss of a coin between charisma and constitution, depending on how you actually want to end up playing that paladin. So up to you. So you've got your top score, you've got your secondary score, which is not the one that I want to talk about. The one I really want to sort of focus in on is your other core score in my mind. That is your lowest score, right? And you might be asking yourself, why is that a core score? And well, I'm glad you're asking because I'm going to tell you. um, your core ability scores are the things in my mind that help inform the character the most in terms of just raw numerical stuff, you know. So, if you are a super high strength barbarian, right? that's your thing. Your thing is being beefy. Your thing is being like just brawn constantly. But if you also have a, 8 in charisma or something, you will probably be avoiding a lot of like social interaction. You'll probably be avoiding a lot of things like that, other than the times where you will be rolling intimidation with your strength score instead of with your charisma score. So that really helps inform a character choice that you can be making to like step back, keep it, a little bit more reserved or something like that. Um, so make sure that you are leaning into those additional ability scores as well. Um, because again, I think that it really, really, really helps inform your roleplay ability with those scores. Um, Now, like I mentioned before, your highest ability score is obviously going to be your core score. Is going to be the thing that you try and highlight about yourself, and that's great. Um, it's important to feel like you succeed on things. It's important for you not only to feel like you succeed, but for you to actually succeed on things um, as you're going through, because otherwise you start to lose a lot of the fun of the game. Because yeah, it's fun to fail, but it's also pretty fun to succeed at stuff. So it's good to have scores that will let you succeed at stuff. Now, everything is dependent on dice, always, but it's always good to, have the ability at least to succeed on something if you get all of the right stuff from the DM. Um, so while it is, super important to succeed and feel like you can succeed and feel like you can be a contributing member of the party, that brings us to our negative score, which is what is important for you to feel less like just a character and more like a person uh, of some sort. It's kind of a weird way to say that, but um, if you think about your actual everyday life, right, there are things that you're bad at. Most of the time, you're probably going to be trying to avoid doing those things unless you've got, honestly, I don't know what that would be, but most of the time you're going to be trying to avoid doing those things, right? So uh, that helps you make some character decisions in the moment. If you are a hyper intelligent wizard, but you have dumped your strength score and it's like a 6 or something, the last thing you're going to want to do is manual labor. I mean, you might even be going so far as to be making an effort to figure out a way to either hire people to carry you around or create a spell that effectively just like lets you make a segue so you can just like sort of lean and roll around with your friends. Um, it's it's up to you how you interpret that, but it can help inform a very very cool character decision in that way. Um, and a lot of times when I tell people about this, I get the question of, "Oh well, how do I play? A low whatever character? Like, how do I play a low intelligent or low charisma character without them just being socially awkward?" Well, that's kind of up to you and your DM and how you guys are going to interpret that. Um, but a couple of suggestions that I would have are maybe they are, instead of just being, the bumbling, awkward character that we associate with low charisma a lot of the time. I don't know why I want to say low intelligence every single time with that. Low charisma, you could be, one of the brooding characters that goes and sits off in the corner and just sort of stares at people, because at that point you are not you're not saying anything if you're trying to intimidate anyone, which means that you could make a pretty fair case for not rolling intimidation using your charisma modifier. You could make it using your strength modifier more than likely, um, depending upon how imposing you are. And honestly, you could make a fair case to your DM uh, for like dexterity or something like that if you're sitting there like flipping a knife between your fingers or something. It it's really up to you in terms of creativity. So you've got your brooding character. You could be like loud and brash instead, and that just really grates on people. And that's why you have low charisma, because you think you are perfectly charismatic. You think you're a lovely person, and you probably are a lovely person. But the way your personality just affects the people around you makes them kind of uneasy and uncomfortable. Um, think like the really, really loud, obnoxious, like Boston, New York, New Jersey kind of person in pick a movie. Most movies where they have that like one person who's really loud, who always makes their opinion known, that sort of thing. They have terrible charisma, but they always end up, making their voice heard, and it could be to the betterment or detriment of everybody around them because it could give the rest of the players around the table either something to springboard off of if you are being this way, because then they can kind of like deal with the character on the side and use you as sort of a bargaining against chip. That doesn't make sense. Something to bargain against, or one of my favorite things is to give the rest of the party something to deal with. Just just kind of deal with, right? Because there is nothing better than there being a group of players who are sitting around who are struggling to make a decision, and then out of nowhere, one of the people is like, "Oh no, I'm already like going, I'm already there. I'm gonna go talk to them," and just walks up and talks to them because it helps move the game along, and it keeps people engaged, and then it forces creative problem solving outside of just you know pre-planning and trying to figure something out ahead of time, because as pretty much anybody that's ever played Dungeons and Dragons knows, no plan survives contact with, well, the players, the enemies, the outside world, pretty much anything. Plans don't survive in D&D for more than, about a step or two. So, um, how I would personally, it depends on the character, but how I personally approach um, playing into your lower ability scores at and this is just me, right? This is just the way that I like to do it. I try not to do anything that is too like typical, because those are played out, and it creates more interesting characters if you can avoid doing that. Um, so for me, for strength, like I said, if I am playing a low strength character, I will oftentimes try and get other people to be the ones that are engaging in the physical labor. I can be acting either higher than or um, you know oh man, I am struggling for words right now. Either acting higher than or sick, or offer up a different solution every single time it comes up. Eventually the rest of the party's going to notice, be like, if they're getting ready to like unload something, you can be like, all right, I'm going to go take a quick lap and keep watch. And if you do that every single time, eventually somebody's going to pick up on it. Low dexterity. The easy one for this one is just sort of like the clumsy, bumbling ding dong. I like to play it as people who are less aware of their surroundings a lot of the time, which I know sort of like plays into wisdom a little bit, but um, it, it's similar enough to the clumsy thing. But if you are so focused on something else over there, and then you run into a door or something like that because you haven't got the like reaction time to get yourself out of whatever you're about to slam into. It dexterity is a little bit more difficult for me to like conceptualize, but it's definitely something where you can play varying degrees of clumsiness, varying degrees of aloofness in terms of just hitting stuff with your body on accident. Um, Constitution, uh, there's a bunch of different ways to play this. I wouldn't say there's a super typical way to do it because people don't lean into it that much, and people usually don't dump con just because of what it gives you ultimately. So if I were playing a character with a very low Constitution score, I would probably do something along the lines of them being sick a lot, or them feeling bad, or them getting injured easily. And I don't mean injured in like a, oh no, I fell, a foot and broke my leg. I mean like normal travel, they'll like sprain their ankle or something if they've been traveling all day. Not something that's going to give you a major detriment to the mechanical benefits of you existing as a person. but enough to make it like, oh Jesus, okay, well, Dave over there sprained his ankle again. We really need to work on fixing him because again, it gives the rest of the party something to work against, something to work on to help, improve everything. Um, Next up is intelligence. Intelligence. It's hard to get out of the dumb rut. You know, most people just play dumb characters. There's nothing wrong with playing a dumb character if you can play a dumb character well. Anyway, um, but when I play a low intelligence character, I will stop filtering a lot of my thoughts, like me personally, um, and I will just say the first thing that comes into my mind in whatever situation because that is how I like to interpret that. Um, Granted, when you get down to like six and below, you're starting to play with the not being able to read thing, which is also not that big a deal. But it can become more difficult when you get lower and lower and lower, and you have to essentially start playing a bear that can talk. Um, but there's a great example of this in a game I played recently. We were given a compass, and my character had an 8 intelligence, I want to say. And so I looked at it and I said, "Yeah, I know how to read that. You just follow the N." And they said, "What about the needle?" And I said, "No, no, no. Trust me, I've been on boats before. You just follow the N." Um, and so we had like a 15-minute discussion about why that was probably not right, in spite of my previous experience on boats, um, and that I was going to be useful elsewhere on the boat, not so much at navigation. So um, you you don't have to play into being just a total moron so much as you can play into being a little bit more oblivious. And oblivious brings us right on next to wisdom. Um, Wisdom for me, the easiest thing to go to always is just not being aware of your surroundings. But the other thing that people often forget, and the thing that is actually my favorite, is that wisdom is also tied to insight, which means that you can play a character that doesn't understand people at all. Honestly, like this same character that I was just talking about with the um, 8 intelligence, I think had a 9 wisdom, which let's be clear here, a 10 is like human average. So 9 is a step below, and that's it. But it is still a negative modifier. Um, and so I played him as not being able to read people, not really paying attention to his surroundings, but that came up less often as not being able to read people because he would just sort of walk up and start talking to anybody that he wanted to, regardless of what they were doing, regardless of what situation they were in, regardless of whatever sort of urgency they seemed like they were having. He always had a pretty chill, pretty calm demeanor, um, which led to a lot of really funny interactions. He talked to a guard who had a bow and arrow pointed at his face, um, who had shot a couple of arrows at his feet, and he just picked the arrows up and put them behind his ears and kept talking while he sat there and ate a piece of fruit. Um, and then the rest of the party again had to deal with that. A lot of these are fun for the party to deal with. Essentially, is what I'm saying. Um, and the low charisma we already kind of talked about. You can be quiet over in the corner. You can be brooding. Obviously, you could be the social awkward or socially awkward, but that starts to fall into a lot of stereotypes. It feels like, and it's more fun to not just stick with what's been done and done and done. So, um, hopefully, any of those helps you out a little bit. I know I've spent the majority of the time talking about this negative score, but that's because I think that people have a pretty good handle on using their high score for character or characterization, um, because that's the one that we default to. It's we want to be good at stuff. Like just as people, we want to be good at stuff, so we try and do the things that we're good at anyway. Um, which is why then playing into your lowest score is important because you avoid the things you're not good at, just sort of inherently as part of being a human being. So that is, let's see, yeah, that is everything that I had to talk about today. I feel really strongly about this two core ability score thing. I know that there are some people who just they'd prefer to just ignore their low stuff. There are some DMs who really just sort of ignore their players' low stuff. And there's some tables where failing is not as rewarded. But at my table, I always try and reward failing as much as possible because it makes for more interesting story beats then. Um, I think at least. Because if you wanted everything, it's not fun anymore. You're just gonna walk up and win. So, with that, thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you all so much for making me a part of your morning routine. I really do appreciate it. If you're enjoying what I'm doing here, go ahead and follow along, subscribe, like, whatever. The more of you that do, the longer I'll be able to do this, and I'm really enjoying doing this. So I hope that you are enjoying it as well. Um, Again, check out the stream on twitch.tv/superdylan at 7 p.m. Eastern tonight. I think it's a really great stream. I think it's a really great cause. So I think that it would be great if we could get as many people as possible there to support that stream. But with that, again, thank you so much. Thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, keep on rolling.